So now that we have Entity Framework installed, our next step is going to be to create our context class. And we are going to create that in our models folder. You may also see developers add a brand new directory or folder labeled DAL, which is short for Data Access Layer. Quite often you will find the context classes in that folder. But we are going to put ours directly into models. And we're going to call it movie context. What is going to make this a context class is that we have to derive movie context from DB context. And once we do that, it becomes a context class. Now, DB context requires entity framework. So we have to add a using statement up here. And once we add that, it's going to recognize DB context. DB context is pretty critical for creating databases when you're using code first. It's actually the bridge between your entities. So in this case, between our movie class and the database itself. It's the context job to perform all of the CRUD operations, to query the database, to track changes, to manage relationships, to handle transactions, all of that. So this is a critical component in the whole process. And what we need to do is create a little movie class constructor that's going to accept DB context options. And it's going to pass that on to a base class. And the base class is DB context. So DB context options are important. It's critical because it basically is going to tell the context what our provider is, and that would be SQL Server. That's what we chose when we installed Entity Framework. And it's also going to tell the context information about our connection string. And we are going to go ahead and code that. Now, the next line that we need to code in here is DB set. And DB set is basically what connects your class or your entity with the table that you're going to be creating. And so our class name is movie. And then the table that we are going to be creating. Now, you don't have to call it movie. You can call it something else. But in this case, we're going to call it movies. And then we've got our get and our set. So at this point, we are done. We're going to save. So again, we added a little constructor for movie context, and we are passing along the options to the base. And this is critical because the options contain the database provider, which ours is SQL Server, and the provider package, which is Entity Framework Core SQL Server. We are also passing along the connection string. And if there are any provider level selectors or entity core behavior selectors, those also get passed along. DB set is also critical because that is how we are making the connection between our entity and the table that we are going to actually create. So at this point, we are done with our context class.